Masterminds yet. So I know I'm here because I said, like, let's have the ability to ask any septic questions that anybody might have. So I know some in the room here know what I used to do. But what I used to do was actually sell the products that the installers would actually put in to install their septic field. So I dealt with a lot of technical issues, failures, but in addition to that, I also used to work with Nova Scotia Environment as a liaison between my equipment suppliers and them to try to get certain products to be approved to be able to be used by the installers without actually having an engineer do the selections and things like that. So I've got a tremendous knowledge of on-site septic. Additionally, subdivision and how that works was another big part of what I used to do, working with the engineers and the contractors. And then as well, before that, I had left a company where I dealt with water treatment and wastewater treatment at a municipal level. So great big plants, but nonetheless, wastewater treatment and water treatment on a small scale, they're the same thing, right? If there's minerals in the water, the same process to get them out. It's just some's a big machine, some's little machines, right? Mm-hmm. So I've got a lot of information that I can share with you guys. I've got a lot of contractors because, you know, we don't always know who to go to. And, you know, I have contractors that can do things cheaper because they're also a qualified professional level 2 that's allowed to select things if the criteria works for them. If the criteria doesn't work for them, I have that same person that has an engineer that will work off of their data instead of having to pay again to do things. So I don't know where we want to go with this, but that's my background. This is what I can do. I guess, you know, if you guys have questions about septic or even well water, you know, quantity, quality, when quantity's low, different options that can be done, different ways to explain things to people so that it's said to them, I guess, in terms that's easy for the average Joe to understand that's not trained in it. So yeah, I guess hit me with your best shots. Right.
Well, we definitely want to know your resources.
Yeah. And so I've got a couple of those. So for resources, the first one that I would give to everybody would be Westside Trucking. His name is John Kidson. 1 second here.
That again, my dog was barking.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so there's John Kidson. He's with Westside Trucking. So John is a QP2, right? So QP2, the difference between a QP1 and a 2, a QP1 is an engineer. So a QP2 is what they just call a qualified person that went through Wastewater Nova Scotia's courses and everything to say that they can dig a hole, see how fast the water percolates through the ground, and they can say it's either this, 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 or this, right? They have a couple of selections. It's been pre-engineered, and as long as it fits within one of these 4 boxes, that's what they can do. If it doesn't fit in one of those 4 boxes, usually something under a half of an acre, that's where we start to run into problems. We may not be able to get enough distance from a well. If it's a dug well, you need 100 feet. If it's a drilled well, you only need 50 feet. So if there's a neighboring property that has a dug well, you still need to be 100 feet from their well. So then that's when they start to try and take all these little places and say, okay, well, over here, that's the only place that the field can go. So then they'll dig the hole there and then they'll test for water percolation. If they get the right flow through that, then that QP2 can select the field that'll go in there. If they can't, then they need an engineer. The reason why I like working with John is because, again, the engineer will use his test pit and all the data he had, so we're not paying another $500, you know, to get somebody in there to dig again. Excuse me. So yeah, we're not paying the money for them to dig again. He'll use their information. And then at that point, the engineer that he uses at most times will always select a sloping sand filter. And sloping sand filters are not the ridiculously priced things like the Peat Systems. You guys have seen those, have you?
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, anybody
Like-
not know what a peat system is in this group? Okay, so peat system,
Expensive, that's all I know.
expensive, exactly, $25,000, expensive. So a peat system is basically the same idea. Your septic comes out and it goes into a tank. The tank is your primary treatment. So the first box of the tank, the solids, they settle to the bottom, the fats, oils, and greases go to the top, and then you've got this middle stuff that goes into the next chamber, and they call that the honey. And that is what's going to go out into your field to percolate into the ground. So that process to the tank still does the same thing, but then it's not going into a field now, it's going into this great big chamber that they have filled with peat moss. And so then the water percolates into that and it's treated by the peat moss. And then it goes out to a subsequent bit after that, that is made with sand for it to percolate back into the ground. But it's had all of its treatment in the peat system, and the water that's going into the ground is already treated and they say ready to drink, but I wouldn't. So that's, you know, what a peat system is. So basically you've got your septic tank, then you've got this peat thing in the middle, and then you've got your sand bed to take the rest of the water. Whereas a septic system, you're going right to the sand bed after the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I'm not sure.
Kelly,
Yeah.
Okay.
Kelly, we're going to be dealing with this one with my daughter, which is
Okay.
hilarious. How often does the peat have to be replaced? Any ideas?
It all depends. It could be like 10, 15 years. You have a annual service contract when you have those with Shaw. They are the distributor of them. They are $150 to $200 depending on where your location is. And essentially you just sign up with them, you pay it annually, and they know your schedule. You don't even have to like talk to them. You'll just one day there might be a man over there at your thing taking off the top and taking a sample of the peat. And then they bring the peat back and they send it off for, you know, analyzing and then
a big difference. Like you said, 10 to 15. That's what I thought too. But I've heard another guy say in between 5 and 10. So
For
that's
what?
essentially for changing the peat, which
Oh,
sounds
well,
very-
again, everything goes. So, okay, I can put a septic field into a house. One in particular I sold just down the road from me a few years back. That one there, it had a septic field installed. They had an issue that the water treatment equipment was backwashing, and it was backwashing all the time. Like it was actually malfunctioning, and it was making the well go dry on them. So anyhow, when we sold the house and we did the septic test, the septic field was completely saturated. And the reason for that was because all the salt from the backwashing that was constantly happening, plus it was overloading the field because you had your laundry, your daily use, everything people do, but then you have this backwash. And that's why they'll set your backwash to go off at like 4 in the morning. And then you're going to have your supply of water and everything there, but your septic field will have been able to, you know, take care of that. And by the time people are waking up at 6, that would have percolated through the field. And, you know, now people are showering and that new water's going in. So we're not hydraulically overloading it, right? Mm-hmm. So, sorry, I get off onto little tangents of technicalities sometimes.
Oh, that was me that did that to you, but
Yeah.
thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another big thing I've heard with the peat too is like any septic system, you gotta be like extra careful with the amount of burger fat, bacon fat. Like you're not supposed to put that down your drain regardless. But
No, but as long as you're not overloading your tank, Alex,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be an issue, because what happens, again, that first chamber of the tank, everything comes in, right? And it gets the time to settle, right? So now your fats and oils and greases, they naturally float to the top, and your sediments, you know, poops and all the other good stuff, they kind of go down to the bottom, right? And then everything in the middle is what goes through the next part.
Yeah.
So if you are putting way too much down, then your sludge blanket starts off as nothing, and then over time, more fats, oils, and greases go down. It gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And so now that tank is getting smaller and smaller and smaller for the stuff to go into the next side. And if I'm doing 6 loads of laundry that day, now I'm getting more water being pushed into there. And so now that fat blanket's moving up and down and breaking up. And so now solids and stuff can end up going into the other side through that baffle.
Yeah.
And then making it out to the field and yes, causing that problem.
Yeah.
So one major thing to tell your clients, do not do the, 1 day a week laundry for your family of 5, because you are going to overload your field. You are going to push solids into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
People should do no more than 2 loads of laundry a day. That's, a recommendation. Have you guys ever been on to Department of Environment's website? They have a really great wastewater on-site septic, how to take care of your field document. Have you guys all seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay.
Mhm.
What I'll do is I'll send this because Erin has everybody that's in here, and then she'll have emails for everybody. And
That'd be awesome.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll send her the copy of the, little booklet that is available through Wastewater Nova Scotia, and she can send that out to everybody. I feel that it's a great little item to give to all of our
I can
clients,
hear it on the speaker.
especially those that have not, had a septic field in the past. They don't know how to treat it. But even people that do have a septic field, they still may not know how to treat it and what to do with it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And do not use Kirkland toilet paper. Damn
No.
it.
Yeah.
Don't use what?
Kirkland toilet
toilet
paper.
paper.
It doesn't break down. And never put paper towel down, right?
No.
Septic friendly.
Tampons, pads, right? Like,
Yeah.
people flush all kinds of things that they just don't want to have to deal with in their garbage cans. Right?
So,
But
does
Worse
the-
to deal with it in the $20,000 fixer.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question. Does the cost of the septic depend on the perk number, like if perk 2 or?
100%. So here are the choices that the QP2s have, which are the qualified people that can select off of criteria A, B, C, D, right? So you have what they call a C1, you have a C2, and you have a C3 or an area bed. Those are the 4 things they're allowed to pick. A C1 is the best and cheapest, usually as long as you don't need a pump to get up to it, is usually going to be around $7,000. A one with a pump is going to add about $2,000 to that because you need a concrete chamber, plus you need the pump and some electrical work and so on and so forth done, right? Then you have your C2, and the C2 is still one of those flat systems, right? You don't really see it too much. Sometimes those, again, need to be pumped too. So again, you're going to have a bit of additional cost there. They can range around 10, 12. Then you get into your C3s. Your C3s are the ugly. How many of you guys have saw the god awful hump in the middle of a yard? That's ugly, right? So that is when I would say to my people, if you're getting a C3, let's hire an engineer, right? Because when you're getting a C3, you're getting the ugly mound in the back of your yard. It is worth it because that C3 is going to run somewhere between $17,000 and $20,000. If you pay an engineer, a QP1, to come in, at that point, he can now, because he's putting his stamp of approval on anything he's putting in, he is now the one responsible. So Department of Environment's not, categorizing him into these 4 blocks only. If he's willing to put a stamp on it, they're willing to say, yes, you can do it, right? Because they're an engineer, they have their ethics, they have their training, you know what I mean? Like they're going to do the right thing, right? So the engineer, you're going to be, instead of $1,000 to get a field selected by a QP2 for a QP1/engineer, you're going to be around $1,500. So you double the cost to to 2,000. So you may double to, 50% increase the cost. It all depends. So basically when that happens, then they can say, okay, we're going to put in a sloping sand filter. So now you don't have the big ugly hump. And that sloping sand filter is actually less expensive to install. So your final end result is actually cheaper with going in it with an engineer. So if you get a C3 with a QP2, always say, yeah, let's move on to the next. Because even if they pay Even if they had to pay twice, it's still going to be cheaper and it's going to be much more aesthetically pleasing.
What are you saying? That if you were representing a buyer buying a house with a C3, that they call in an engineer to reevaluate what to do with it, or if there's
Only on a failure.
oh, okay.
Only on a failure. Yeah. If the C3 is there, you just say to them like, yeah, this is the ugly hump and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Good
What's
thing
the
that hump
area
is
bed?
good thing that hump is like 15 years old because you can knock it down later and we can put in a slope and sand filter.
And
Okay, yeah.
what's the area bed, Kelly?
So the area bed is so your typical septic field, as most of you guys are probably aware from doing testing, is one long trench. So it might come in and there's a T and it goes this way and it goes that way, and they're just long runs of pipe and that's it and that's all. With a area bed, and area beds are actually one of my favorites because hydraulically they cover more area than you know, a trench that's, you know, X amount of distance long. With an area bed, what they do is they come down and then they have this one header pipe, and that header, right? So look at my hand, right? Consider this the header pipe, my knuckles. Then you end up with these little fingers that come off. They're usually placed about 10 feet apart from each other. And so your area bed takes up a big square. But as a result of it, there's a whole bunch of sand underneath all of that and gravel under all that pipe, and then the pipe goes out and it's fingered out. So like I said, just imagine, you know, you've got this one long header pipe and then a bunch of little fingers coming off of it. And the area that it has to percolate into the ground is a lot larger. So it's actually harder to hydraulically overload them with more than 2 loads of laundry and life in a house, right?
Those
So-
pipes have holes in them.
Every single one of them have holes in them because those are what they call the orifices. So those pipes, the main pipe going out is solid to carry to the field. Once you get into the field at what is it, 5 and 7, I think, are where they have 4 and 7 is where they have the little holes in the pipe, and they're every foot apart, and those are orifices, and that's where the water, when it's in the pipe, starts dripping out of the pipe, and then it hits the gravel that's in there, which then again makes a softer drop of water into the sand bed that's underneath, and the sand is where the next stage of treatment is happening. It's happening in the sand, not the rocks.
So the finger pipes have holes in them as well?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's how you distribute it, right?
So I have a story to tell you. When I bought my cottage in Ingonish, there was an old guy that lived up the street, and he had helped build it in the 50s.
Here, one second. I just got to pause this. I've got something. Just one sec.
So I said to him, well, do you know what kind of septic it has beyond the cottage? And he told me it has just a regular run-of-the-mill shit tank.
Yeah, that's a holding tank is what that's called.
Yeah.
Those are not.
I had no idea.
Yeah, those are not mortgageable because they are not a treatment. You have to get them sucked out every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here, this would be how an area bed would look. So this here would be your header pipe coming in, or from the tank. This here is your header pipe. And so then there's like a 90-degree here, a T here, a T here, a T here, and a 90-degree here. These pipes here are perforated. And there's sand all underneath of this, then rock, the pipe sits on top of the rock, more rock, and then ground cover. Make sense?
This is the ideal situation for a septic?
What's that?
You're saying this is the ideal situation for a septic?
They're my favorite.
Yeah.
and the reason why is because of their hydraulic capacity, right?
Yeah.
So they
And
can actually allow more water. So, all right, I'll give you the whole other on the same page.
What is it called again? An area? An area. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever find out you have an area bed, just say to your clients, that's great.
Okay.
Now, whether or not the area bed's still functioning and working good, that's what the tests are for.
Or
So is
whether or
that-
not the seller actually knows what they have.
Most don't, but at a certain age, like if you take things like that are quite a bit older, they'll have a lot more area beds. And that's why, if you notice, some of our houses that are 40 and 50, they don't fail. But our houses that are like 25, they fail.
Mhm.
And the reason why is because one is better than the other. I don't know why they don't put area beds everywheres, and everywheres probably can accept them if they're C1s or C2s. I don't understand it, but people
Just
choose what they choose.
probably because they're just that touch a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
So if not an area bed, is it just one straight lateral run?
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. So here's what a typical field would look like. It'll come in with a little T right here, and then you'll run this way and you'll run that way.
Yeah.
For 100 feet, right? Or you'll enter on this end, right? So it'll just leave the tank, and then all of a sudden now here's where the fields start, and so there's sand, and this entire pipe for 100 feet is a perforated pipe doing the same thing in all designs, right? That's how they work.
Is there a place online where you can go to find out what kind of septic tank is at a particular property? I thought I heard somebody say that they found out what kind was, no. Okay.
No, that's only available for wells. You can do well logs, and that's only been really accurate in the last 10 years. Anything
Yeah.
before that, they used to say lot or whatever, and so like there was nothing that you could really identify it.
Oh, okay.
The only way to know is through a septic certificate. And Tina, which off are you in PEI or are you Halifax?
Yeah, Halifax.
Okay, cool. So you have all the same rules as me, because I don't know PEIs, right? Like every province is going to have different rules, right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is you get a septic certificate. And people, when they're expecting a certificate, they're expecting this really formal thing. And,
No.
and it's so not formal. It's a hand sketch thing. Host is here, little line. Tank is here, little line. Field is this way. But it's just saying that that's what's installed here, right? And then you have the approval from the province that lets you know that it's this. And then there is something that's a little bit more drawn. But the final approval, your septic certificate, is the final inspection, which is this hand-drawn thing that looks
And
really
so
cool.
that's just one piece of paper, and that paper gets lost, then what?
The only thing that you can do is you can apply through the FOIPOP to allow you to gain access to the application that was originally started with Department of Environment, or the seller can go and get it. But it is going to be a 2 to 3 week period. At the end of the day, I don't give a crap what's under there. My inspection is going to tell me what's under there. It just is, right? And the only thing I care about is it working? And, that you're going to know from your inspection. So the type of field that it is kind of irrelevant, unless once you get in there and they say, oh, it's a field bed, you can go like, oh, right, that's awesome. You got one of them. Yay, you.
Is it relevant to know if you're listing a property?
No, not at all. All you need to know is where is it, right? Now, I mean, if somebody has their septic certificate, I mean, hey, if they have it, and they have their well certificate, and they have their building permits, and they have whatever, like I stick it all together. Here's your information. It's great to give, right? So,
Kelly, on our forms, it says, if the septic tank has not been pumped out in the last
2 years, 4 years, whatever you choose to say.
So what's your opinion on that? Does it depend on how big a family has been living there, or?
100%. Now, I mean, as a buyer, I would say that if it hasn't been done in the last 6 months, I want it done. Because, I mean, we don't know how they've treated their field. We don't know how much fats, oils, and greases. And sometimes you'll open up the tank and you'll be like, ooh, they like bacon. And so at that point, you'd look at it and go, okay, well, I don't care. They did this 6 months ago, but the thing is bloody well full because they ate bacon every week. And instead of, wiping it out with paper towel and putting it in their green bin, they rinsed it down their sink. So, they took this field or this tank and they treated it the way it would be treated over a 2-year period with a family of 5 in it. So you might end up saying we want it pumped beforehand. And you might also find out that there's also other issues on the other side, like solids and different things, in the piping it to the field. So it is a case by case basis. I've had people that have been just 2 people in a house and they haven't pumped their field for 6 years. And to me, that's not a red flag. I'm not worried about that. That's 2 people.
No.
If it was a family of 5 and they didn't do that for 6 years, I'd be like, okay, well, we'll see how the inspection goes, right? So yeah, it is definitely a case by case, people by people basis for sure. Yeah.
Well, I had one, and the lady told me, it was an older lady, she said, I put septo, I think it was called.
Septic
It's a
bath,
powder.
yep.
Yeah, in it every 2 weeks. And there's only 2 of us in the house, and she hadn't had it pumped out. And she doesn't use caustic cleansers in the toilet.
Yep.
She uses organic cleansers. And she said she hadn't had it pumped out in 10 years, never had a problem.
Okay, yeah, and again, never had a problem and not knowing you have a problem are 2 different things, because the only way you really typically know you have a problem is when shit backs up in your house.
Mhm.
Yep.
Basically.
So, you can't, you say, okay, I understand that you've never experienced the problem. However, it hasn't been done and it is a field of a certain age. And because of the fact that, you guys are just 2 people in here, you're going to have less laundry, less showers, depending on your age, because to me, that exact statement comes from somebody that is an elderly person that is a bird bath every 3 days and then actually has a shower and wears her clothes 5 times before they actually throw them in the washer. And you know what I mean? Like that's the demographic that will say that to you. And anyhow, with that being said, you just say, like, we may have a problem and don't know we have a problem because you guys aren't putting enough water in there for it to back up into your house. So it might be going out there and it could be backing up right to your house, but never came in and you don't know. So because of this, I'm going to strongly recommend that we do a pre-inspection and then we'll know. Because, and I encourage it. I mean,
No
for ourselves,
surprises.
if we could get our sellers to spend $345 to find out that the major one item that could blow their deal sideways is okay, and that they can have confidence walking into every negotiation, right? Knowing that nobody's going to come back and beat me up about my septic field.
So what do you do in the winter?
In the winter, it's not a problem because there's dye testing and then there's actual getting in, right? So in the winter, you can get a machine there. There's no reason why somebody can't dig up something, right?
Mhm.
We don't have enough frost around here. And unless we're into the real mid to end January, February, that's the only time we typically have frost in our ground. Other than that, our winters are so mild that we don't, right?
Yeah,
So,
I did one last winter and it had to be -20. The ground was rock hard everywhere. And by the time we broke a 4-inch crust, that septic tank was making enough heat that even though the frost was a foot deep off to the sides, it was only 4 inches deep over top of the tank.
just think there's methane gas going on in there, guys, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the breakdown thing. Like it's hot, right?
Yeah.
Good point.
So if your sellers want, if it's good to have your sellers do that, you don't want them to do that before a septic inspection though.
Not pump it out, but you can dig it up and you can have it ready, right? Like,
Yeah, have it ready, but to know that there's any issues, they're not going to know till the septic or the inspection's done.
but that's why I'm saying pre-inspection, right? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, they're
my listing on 5001 Highway 7, I said to my sellers, right, we were kind of going along and I'm like, yeah, I said, just thinking about it, this house has been here as long as I can remember in this community. I said, it's an old house. I said, and it's probably the original field. I said, I think we should probably, just do a pre-inspection. I said, it's $345. I said, let's find out, right? Well, they called me crying because, of course, what I told them to do, proof that they had actually no field. So cesspools is what they used to call it. So it's basically you got 2 round tanks. First tank is the one to settle in. The second one is the one that takes the good stuff. And then there's holes in the bottom of it, literally percolates in the ground. There's no treatment. It was terrible. Those are not a field. They're functionable, but they're not a field. So as a result, my clients ended up having to get a new one installed. And so the other chap that I used for that particular run, because John wasn't available, was McFarland's. And again, McFarland's is the same thing. They're QP2s and they're installers. So one of my good friends, Jason Rayfuse, he's not a QP2. Whenever I have a failure that requires an engineer, and it's going to be like a sloping sand filter or, a Peat System, then I throw my buddy Jason into the mix because now he can compete and he's useful. But he's not useful to me because he can't make a selection. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, so McFarland's ended up coming in there, and it was an area bed. And Alex, I think you showed that house actually.
Yeah, I was there when John was there digging the hole.
Yeah, there you go. So basically we ended up having to put in a whole new field on that house. And, my clients, they bought it and they bought it privately. Nobody told them to do these things. And there was a lot of bad things, but anyhow, we just closed yesterday. That house is done and they've now got their new one and we did a septic test.
I don't think you mentioned how much an area bed costs. You did for the rest of them, but.
Area beds are between 7,000 and 10,000, depending on if they need a pump. And then again, you still have your $1,000 to get a selection. So add that on top of it as well.
Okay.
All right. So Kelly, I have done, I don't know, between 10 and 15 septic inspections now. And I have had one that has not had an issue. So what is your suggestions when it comes to the infamous sagged pipe, slightly sagged T?
Okay. This is my opinion on it. And it's my opinion. And this is what I tell my people. Negotiate the cost off. Don't fix the goddamn thing. It's just going to sag again. So this pipe that's going in is the same pipe that's used for the city for its sewer. And when the city is putting in the sewer, they are digging down a trench. They are putting down gravel, and they've got this plate tamper. And I don't know if you guys know what this is, but it's this great big machine that's like literally bang, 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 bang down on the ground. And it's compacting all of that gravel, right? And so that is the perfect installation for an SD35 pipe, which is the thickness, that's how they measure it, which is what sewer pipe is.
Yeah.
They are not plate tamping the carrier pipe from a house to the tank.
No.
So they've got gravel under it and they're chinging it in and they're doing their thing and then they're putting the overburden on top of it. And depending on how deep that overburden is, now you're getting more and more weight on it. Now you're compacting the gravel and everything underneath, right? Yeah. And so then as it's happening, now we're getting a little sag in the pipe. Now, if the sag is a true sag and it's 100% full of water, that needs to be fixed, right? Yeah. But if it's like a little tiny bit, in my opinion, ask for the money so that in the future when you try to sell it, you get an agent that's just going to fight you on something that's just going to happen again. I had one on East Chesuncook Road when I was representing the buyer that was interested in the property. We terminated on inspection, but mainly because we found something better and we wanted to move on. And we used the inspection as an excuse to be able to do it. However, there was a sag in the pipe that she got fixed on her sale to correct the sag. But again, she was there for 5 years, overburdened and everything, continued on it and did the exact same thing because they cannot bed that pipe good enough. They just can't. It's impossible. So when you fix a sag, they're going to get a sag again. I've very seldom seen a sag not reoccur.
Yeah, and
so,
that's my biggest gripe with some of these inspectors, and obviously we're not going to go names and all that. We could probably guess a couple. But like we had there was a slight water collection in a T going to the area beds. We were able to get the camera to
Still
make the
listen, I just
first,
got to fill up my water. I'm
make
still
the
listening.
camera take the first turn.
Yeah.
And then when we saw the T, we figured by the camera screen, it was pooling about a foot right at the T in diameter. And if it was a 1/4 inch deep, we'd be lucky. And the inspector wanted to blow it apart, dig it up. Like had my
That must have
boss,
been Dean.
that wasn't Dean, but it was.
It was Derek.
Yeah. It was,
Yeah. Because Derek is always looking for business for his stuff, right?
And that's what my biggest gripe with it all is
Yeah.
like,
Nothing pisses me off anymore. Or I shouldn't be cursing on this thing. I'm being recorded. No, nothing ticks me off more than getting a inspection report with a quote.
Yeah.
It's a conflict of interest, isn't it?
Wouldn't you think? But see, they don't have the same ethics we have, right?
Yeah.
They're not held at the same level that we hold ourselves to and are held to, by people that enforce it, right? Yeah. So, major issue. I personally do not use him, and that's 100% the reason why. I use Total Water. I will use Ken Hill, again, same story. Neither of these two, they're both QP2s, and they're both, very qualified to give an opinion, but they have absolutely zero interest in the result and a potential business opportunity for them.
I've used Ken. I've only ever used Ken.
Ken's wonderful. He
know the difference.
And Megan and Tracy and Mark with Total Water, they're phenomenal as well.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, Dean Walker, he talks too much, and I just wish he would realize that, it's okay, Dean, to share your knowledge. We want you to share your knowledge. I don't mind Dean at the site because I set the expectations with my clients ahead of time. Listen, he's going to talk real technical with you and stuff like that, and then we'll dumb it down afterwards, right? Like, don't get caught up in anything he says. I'll translate it for you. So he might put you at arms, but don't get there. Just wait and we'll talk about it a little bit further, right? And they're always okay with it, because then when I explain everything that Dean was saying, doing, then they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? But Dean is so easy to scare people, right? So I don't recommend him, but I will, deal with him just because I can combat him, and I'll do it on the site. And Dean's actually kind of learned to work with me over the years because he knows me from back in my old industry, and he knows that I was involved with Nova Scotia Environment and, all the other installers, and I was supplying equipment to them, and like, he knows my background. So when we're at a site and I start, dumbing it back down, then he kind of backs off a little bit. We've had a couple of times where we, kind of butted heads a bit, and I've said my piece and he said his piece, and I think we have a mutual respect now. Right? But yeah, he'd be my last choice.
Kelly, or for everyone, I guess, when you need that septic tank exposed, who do you rely on to do that? The buyer?
The seller, 100%.
Seller.
Seller has to have it ready exposed. Okay.
Yeah, no, right in our contracts. Marion, are you how, or Nova
I'm
Scotia?
in Cape
Okay,
Breton.
Breton.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so you have the same forms as us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
we're not
So, yeah.
separated yet.
Yeah, and PEI is different, so I just so yeah, basically, in our offer under 2.1, it states in the water and septic schedule that the seller will have the tanks exposed and the well marked and blah blah. Like, it actually literally says they're going to expose it, and you put the date. And I always usually give them about 5 days, because they might need to get somebody with a machine, or they might need to shovel it. Whatever, right? Give them a few days.
Yeah.
I'll send somebody in to get the water test beforehand if it is on a well, and then, and then at that point, we'll go in and we'll do our septic inspection, right? So
I lost a sale this winter because it was in Ingonish, so it's very rural, and the seller, well, he had probably at least 12 feet of snow. He just said, there's no way. I'm not digging through all that. And
I actually would have totally understood that too. And I
Yeah.
would have been like, okay, well, maybe you should take your hose off until the spring.
the buyer walked on it.
Yeah, and they should have, right? And my comment to that other agent was maybe they should take their hose off until the spring, because nobody is going to take a $20,000 issue on by themselves. Otherwise, you're just going to have to reflect it in the price. We're going to have to assume that it has failed. So which way would you like to proceed, right? Because like, hey, if you could get 20 grand off the house, why not?
Have you ever had the occasion where you go for the septic inspection and it's not dug up? Like, what do you do in that?
Well, you tell them that if we're going to be billed, you are now in breach of your contract, because it actually says that you're going to have it done by this date. We showed up. You didn't have it done. My people at Total Water, they actually send a document that I forward to the seller's agent that clearly states this is what needs to be done before this. So
Yes,
not only are you not in breach of contract because it said it in your contract, but we also told you exactly what we needed and you chose not to do it. So if we're getting an extra cost to come back, now that's on you, right? Now, my people, they've never charged me to go back because it's just like in and out, but I've always told them that I think they should, because in my opinion, they had that time set up for them to make $300.
Yeah.
And now they're not. So they should be compensated for what they've done, right? We all want to be compensated, right?
I love it when the agent actually tells you, oh yeah, the sellers dug it up, and you get there and they've only dug up one cover.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's why I like what, my Total Water people do is they have a nice little document. And it very clearly has pictures, like this is what we're looking for. It has all the different types of tanks, because we have tanks that sometimes only have one hole. We have tanks that have the 2 holes. We have the tanks that have those long slats across the top, right? Like there's all kinds of different tanks. And so their little document that they send out, it has all those different things on there. And, it's very easy for somebody to know, even where the clean out is inside their house. Because at the end of the day, if they only have their outlet dug up, but their inlet isn't, if the clean out is accessible on the inside of the house, we can still do the same inspection, right? So they can pick and choose, but they know exactly what they need to do.
Can you send us that little pamphlet as well when you send us the other?
I can do that. Yeah, I'll send my contacts, the pamphlet. Hold on, better make some notes.
Don't you love it when they have the risers? It's just so easy.
Oh
That's
yeah,
so
well,
easy.
that's my place. Like my house, my tank is 4 feet underground, right?
Yeah.
And the next time I actually have to, get in there, I am 100% putting those on.
Yeah.
But with that being said, because mine are so far down underground, they can't even get a camera into it. So then at that point, we're only dealing with load testing and dye testing. So it's making sure that my tank is accepting the water, not, coming up too high, too low, and then going into the next place and then putting dye and then looking for dye coming out of the property in various locations, right?
Since you mentioned the dye,
Yeah.
I've been a part of a few that we've ended up putting the dye through. How long does your inspectors that you use usually go back? Like, do they look for the dye while they're there?
48 hours, right? So major failure happens at, immediate, right?
Well,
it starts
Running down
pumping
the
out of the
street.
ground or into a pond, or the major failure is like visible almost immediately. When some comes out, you might still see a little tiny bit of some, but at the end of the day, it needs to all be coming like in one area and be pretty strong. I'll tell you about an example, and I'm gonna have to run here in a second, because I thought I had it was an hour for this, right, James?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I am gonna have to run in a second, but I had one that basically we had a sale in September and everything was dry, and it failed because the well wasn't producing as much water. And so if you want to do well next time, Janice, as well, I will actually mastermind on wells. And so basically what ended up happening was the well went dry, but they did complete the septic test and nothing went wrong, but we were at a dry time of the year. And so the fact that my field didn't fail then, and then now months later, we're getting a new offer, and we had a goddamn monsoon. There was so much water that was happening at the time during their inspection. And I noticed, and this is just me and my, life and what I've always done. I noticed that the back end of the lot was really soupy and stuff like that. And I was saying about different things that, somebody might need to do as I showed it to different buyers that contacted me about it. And I'd say back here, you might need to do some drainage stuff or whatever, because I noticed it does get pretty soupy back here. So when we ended up with an accepted offer on the house, and then the other agent tells me that the field failed, I'm going like, well, that doesn't make sense. We didn't fail in September. Why are we failing in April? Right? Like this, it can't have just hit its whole thing in April, right? Like end of life. Like I've got 2 people in a house. They were a retired couple, the same ones that I'm talking about that probably wash their clothes every 3 to 5 times and bird bath for a couple of days before they shower, right? These people are not, abusing their field, right? So I'm going like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, we do have all that water and everything at the back end of the lot. And there's a lot of, water that's being pushed down towards that field, because the field was down in the front of the property, which was, if you look at my arm, here's all the water that's pooling, here's a field down here, and then here's a ditch. Well, water was coming out in the ditch. And the day they did it, again, was a monsoon. So I started to say I don't think that there's anything wrong with the field, because we would have failed back in September when it was dry, because if a field's saturated, it's saturated. Like it can't get through, because there's a biomass that builds up in the sand and the rocks underneath that stops the water from being able to percolate through. It's like an impermeable surface. So a failure would be any season. It wouldn't matter if it was truly a failure. So if we didn't fail in September and now we're failing in April, something's wrong. And so I started thinking, and again, I have a really hard time, because I have to pull myself and say, no, I'm a realtor. I'm not a septic specialist, right? But I still can't help knowing what I know, right? And so I'm going like, I don't think this field's failing. What I think is wrong here is I think that there's way too much water up here, and all that water is coming down to the field. And now we're hydraulically overloading the field with the water from the property and the water from our life, right? And so I was like, no, I don't think we're failed. I'm like, guys, let's not throw in our towel right yet. Let's not stress out. And I talked to the other agent. The other agent's like, oh, well, the field's only supposed to work when it's not raining. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. So what I was saying was that we needed to dig down before the field, and we needed to put in a French drain. They call that an interceptor ditch, so that we could intercept all the water from the back of the property, catch it here below the field, and direct it over there so it doesn't overload my field. But the only way I could prove it, I still had to get John to come in. John had to dig down until we found the field, and we could see all the sand and all the rock, and it was all clear and beautiful. It was perfect. It was exactly what I said, that the water was intercepting the field or was hitting the field, overloading it hydraulically, so it couldn't take the house's water plus the land above's water. But when we intercepted it, now the field's dry and everything's good. It was a $3,000 repair as opposed to a $10,000 to $20,000 septic replacement.
So if you have a saturated bed, can you salvage it that way?
Only if there's a reason that it could be, right? So I saw that I had water that was saturating my bed. So then we dug down to the bed to confirm that the rock and the sand was all clear, right? And at that point, then we were able to say, okay, it's being overloaded by the water from the back end of the property. We need to divert that water somewhere else. So we're going to intercept it and send it somewhere else. And now my field's only dealing with the water that's coming from our septic tank. And so, yes.
I have to run. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I do too. I do too.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to run. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Bye,
no,
Tina.
Tina, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
And listen, I was going to say, because all of you guys, seriously, I'm available at any time for you guys to like, send a text, email, or even call. Ask Jason Paul from the office. I've had many in-depth conversations with him, walking him through how to explain this to his people in a way that they're not scared, or how to explain it to the other agent in the way that they can bring it to their clients to make it more understandable to them. And
Okay.
and I speak in very layman's terms because I wasn't trained on this. I ended up into a job doing this and I learned it. So,
Yeah.
for me, I learned on layman's terms. I learned all about what to do with it. And I understand the technical, but I still had to put it in Kelly Brown's terms that made sense for head, right? So I can always give that to you guys. So when you do run into it, and I say this all the time to everybody at the office, I'm always available to help you guys figure out, what's the next best step, who you should talk to, what you should say, and, kind of guide you along. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Complete with bleep boats, Kelly.
Bleep boats, yeah. And bleep my video, I cursed, I think, 2 times. Damn it. Oh,
That's great.
I'm getting the tea off time. My boyfriend's going, it's time.
All
So,
right,
yeah,
well,
no,
thank
I
you.
do have to run, guys, because we do actually have to be to Montague here in 23 minutes, and it takes about 15 to get there. So
Go and enjoy. It's a beautiful day for
I
it.
know, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
So
Better
yeah,
than yesterday.
everybody definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me at any time about septic or well, because I have lots to offer on both subjects. And
Well, we
I
may
will
get
send
you
contact.
in. We may get you in July for wells because I think
Yep.
for all the masterminds we already have them slotted
Yep.
for the month of June. Yeah,
That's fine. Yep.
which is great. So, yeah, I think it's a great way to share information.
No, I think it was. This is great. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your golf.
We will.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming
Thanks.
on. Thanks for joining.